So I am extremely involved in civic engagement issues in our diaspora in Florida, building on the work of extremely talented people who spent years establishing the foundational work, thank you, for that work in Florida for many, many years. So we are going to talk a little bit about civic engagement, diaspora solidarity, what it's going to take for our community to really build power is to come together. And that has been one of the hardest things for us. Okay? The folks here are going to tell you who they are. They are all doing work from the diaspora in different areas, all touching on art, philanthropy, education, and voter power building. Okay? And so we're going to hear from them, but what I want you to take away and the questions, challenge them. Because where we need to get to is the point where we can find common ground and power build so that we can take on this challenge for our community. Not only rebuilding Puerto Rico, but making a stronger here to be able to help Puerto Rico rebuild that place. ¿Les parece? ¿Sí? Yes. Okay, vamos. 5 minutes each. So we're going to start with Angelique. I know these people really well. So, but I want them to introduce themselves. So 5 minutes, I'm going to hold you to it. And then we're going to go through some questions that we've talked about ahead of time. But please, do you have index cards? Some index cards out there? Yeah. Okay, so use those, but we'll also do hand raising, okay? Take it away.
Okay. Buenas tardes, I'm Angelique, Sina. I'm the president of Friends of Puerto Rico. And we started in 2015, and we really began because we wanted to give back, like I know most of you are very passionate. There's no mic, so okay, so louder. Okay. I'm very tall, as you all see. Okay. So I'm Angelique Sina, I'm the president of Friends of Puerto Rico, and we started Friends in 2015 to give back to the island, which I know most of you are very passionate about. And we began with an arts project where we were able to celebrate the reunion of the 3 Magi's, which are 3 paintings. We asked our friends to support us financially, and then we had that celebration in DC. At the time, there were a lot of people from Puerto Rico, but not as many as now. People were not really civically engaged or willing to come together just to celebrate that we were Puerto Rican and that we are different and loud, and we celebrate our amazing music and food. Now, moving to 4 years later, our goal is to continue to build philanthropy in the island by engaging the diaspora through mentorship. So just this last weekend, we launched a youth entrepreneurship program where we have 100 students from Instituto Nueva Escuela, which I know Ana Maria Garcia Blanco was recently in the panel, and these students participate in an entrepreneurship program so that they can be self-sufficient leaders. We don't want them to go through anything in life without being capable of having the mentors and the networks that they will need in order to be successful. And our goal is to have 100 mentors from the diaspora that will really complement them through this stage of them learning all of these skills, from financial literacy to technology to how to communicate and how to sell coffee, because the program is really based out of agriculture. And to this date, we have over 30,000 friends that have supported us. We also play a role in engaging people that feel like they're from Puerto Rico for some reason and they love the island and they're willing to write a check or attend our events. And we are just really engaged with the intersection of arts, education, and entrepreneurship. And that is called the Orange Economy, which is something a little different, but it's based out of an economic study from the Inter-American Development Bank. And I'm very happy to be here and willing to answer any more questions. I'll keep it short so I can also give some time to this wonderful panel. Thank you.
Well, buenas tardes a todos. Welcome everyone. My name is Jorge Silva. I am a professor at CUNY, at Oscos Community College, but also I head the School of Professional Studies at Universidad Sagrado Corazón in San Juan, Puerto Rico. So you might ask yourself, well, how can he teach in New York and also head a school in Puerto Rico? Well, I was telling Irene, I'm in the Guagua area. And my daughter who's here will testify, I go to Puerto Rico every month. So I have that briefcase, I do this, it already packs itself and pretty much goes to JFK, and I'm in San Juan at least once a month, working on developing a project that actually came out of the situation in Puerto Rico. Before I came to New York, I've been here about 10 years. Before I came to New York as the head of the SBA, the Small Business Administration, I was back in Puerto Rico in economic development, Secretary of Economic Development, and also as Chief of Staff to the Governor. So I spent many years in Puerto Rico and got to know the issues that Puerto Rico faces very intimately. And one of the principal things that we in the diaspora and Puerto Ricans also in the island should be looking at and working towards, and part of what I'm doing is looking at our youth. And as Angelique mentioned, how can we turn that youth, that Puerto Rican new generation, into the leaders of the future in Puerto Rico and in the diaspora. And one of the principal areas in which we think that can make a big difference is in entrepreneurship. We believe that entrepreneurship is one of those big equalizers where someone, irrespective of family relationships or even political affiliations, can, based on merit, make a difference. And that's why at the School of Professional Studies at Sagrado, and also here at CUNY, I have focused on teaching particularly entrepreneurship and all the areas in which the youth can develop businesses. So I would be more than glad to discuss how you all can help in that process. I'm very optimistic. Post Maria, the diaspora became much more active than I had ever seen it before. And I think that is a process that continues. Of course, there was the urgency right after the hurricane, but we have stayed active, and I think that active involvement of the diaspora can and will make a significant difference for Puerto Rico and for Puerto Ricans. So glad to be here. Thank you.
And just to make everybody aware, we put up all of their Twitter handles, only so you can follow them on social media if you want to get in contact. Anything they say sparks an idea, you want to reach out, here's the way. Irene.
Pues buenas tardes, yo soy Irene Vilar. I was born in Barceloneta, en la finca Higuerito de Palmas Altas, where I lived until I was 9 years old when my mother passed away. And I left the island to go to boarding school in New Hampshire. And when I arrived in New Hampshire, in this little, very white school, Episcopalian boarding school, I got there because it had happened that in the 1940s, this amazing monk-like of a man from New Hampshire had gone to Puerto Rico as a misionario, and he had gone to the St. John's Episcopal School in Trujillo Alto and had become the teacher of my father and my two uncles, who were Episcopalian priests. And we grew up with this image of this amazing man from New Hampshire who had brought liberal studies and liberal thinking to my father and uncles, who were Episcopalian priests after going through Episcopalian school. In any event, I left the island, I joined the diaspora in 1980 when I was 10 years old. And I was ashamed. I was ashamed of speaking with an accent, and I was ashamed of my skin color, and I was ashamed of being part of this community that was really not my community. And one day that I was crying in a hallway, this monk, Mr. Boynton, gave me a book. And it was in Spanish. And it was the book by my own grandmother. It was a book written by Lolita Lebron. It was a poetry book that she had written in jail. It's a book called Sándalo en la celda. And I got this book and I slowly straightened my back and I began to breathe better as shame left me. And I began to have an inkling of what pride and cultural identity is. I didn't have a language for it, but I did feel it in my body. And so that's how my activism began. That day that this Anglo man helped me conquer my shame, which is an irony, that a white man helped me conquer my shame. So I always like to talk about that because it's so complex. The ways that we go about creating coalitions, it is such a mystery sometimes where you can find a brother and a sister, and it's not necessarily within your tribe. So that's how I want to begin. I want to introduce myself as the Puerto Rican mother of 2 Latina girls born in Denver, Colorado, Lolita and Loretta. And a very melancholic woman who, a couple of days after Maria, had no idea how to help, but felt an incredible urge to be part of the healing of my country, and I had no idea of exactly how to do that. And as I was trying to find my father, because he was missing for 9 days in Palmas Alta, there was a big flooding, and he was fine. I mean, he had a lot of pitorro saved with him. So he was fine, but for 9 days, everything came. I began to doubt everything, but mainly the main question was, who the hell am I today after Maria? Where do I belong? What do I do? It just stirred these questions for me. And so as I asked the question, what should I do? I heard actually one of the things that Lolita told me shortly before she died, which was the following. Irene, mira, la patria no va a llegar pronto, quizás no llegue jamás, pero si llega es porque el puertorriqueño va a aprender a alimentarse. Y si sabemos alimentarnos, quizás la patria se manifiesta solita. So we launched my nonprofit. I'm the founder of America for Conservation in the Arts, an environmental education nonprofit founded in Denver, Colorado, in Boulder. And we do environmental education. We build community resilience through ecological and cultural educational programming. And our flagship program is Promotores Verdes, which is a program that I founded here with my colleague Fernando, which is a very, very, very interesting citizen-driven advocacy program that I'll talk about it later. But in any event, we launched the Puerto Rico Resilience Project 3 days after Hurricane Maria in the form of La Guagua Solidaria as a counterpoint to La Guagua Aérea. So La Guagua Aérea has this image of el puertorriqueño que se va, La Guagua Solidaria es el puertorriqueño que regresa porque es tiempo de regresar, and for many other reasons. So I'm going to shut up, but I'll continue talking about all of our work on the island, which has really grown into a huge, blown-up youth environmental stewardship program, Promotores Verdes, in the form of camps that we have been hosting since last summer.
Can we applaud for that presentation? It's kind of hard to go after this incredible panel, but good afternoon, buenas tardes. I'm Rafael Collazo. I'm the National Political Director for Unidos US, formerly National Council La Raza. It is truly an honor to be here. Dr. Edwin Melendez is actually on our board as well, so thank you all for bringing me to this. And since we're sharing, I wanted to share today that one of the things that I think has driven me growing up in North Philadelphia, having the blessing to go to Columbia University a few years ago in New York City, and now being as a Puerto Rican, the political director for the largest Hispanic civil rights organization in the country, I think what I reflected on it being here today with all of you is that it was that drive to sort of try to figure out a way to overcome the fact that I'll never be, in my mind, struggling with the fact that I didn't grow up on the island, unlike my other 27 cousins, in that I wanted to prove my Puerto Ricanness. And so prove it, not just, I don't dance, I don't sing, I don't rap, I'm not particularly fashionable, but I could do it in my own way, as a nerdy person that cares about the world. And being in this crowd, no offense, makes me feel at home.
Right at home.
And aren't too many places where I think people of our mentality have this kind of togetherness. So thank you for the blessing to be here. So I wanted to just quickly share, because I want to get into the conversation with everyone, that the things I want us to impart, and I think some of the positive messaging about the opportunity we have that came out of the last plenary, I want to reiterate from a political perspective. Brass tacks, civic engagement, politics. Puerto Ricans can decide the presidential election in Florida alone. period. So let's just ground ourselves in the idea that we do have our destiny in our hands from a political perspective. And let's not underestimate the influence we have in places like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Ohio. A lot of Puerto Ricans in Wisconsin. The other part of that is that beyond just the hard political reality of that opportunity, is that we have every asset and every ability to do it ourselves. And one of the things I wanted to share with you all, as again, doing this work nationally, and I've been doing voter registration work 20 years and coalition building with our nonprofit organization, so we'll talk about that. But that in the last, I don't know, since July, I've been in 8 cities in the Southwest doing federal advocacy work on behalf of the organization in the Latino diaspora. So in San Diego, San Francisco, Phoenix, San Antonio, and some other communities in the Southwest, Las Vegas. And the biggest message I got out of it was 2 things. One is that, and this has been more acute and more prevalent post-Maria, but this has been the case for quite some time, is because of the unfortunate brain drain of the island because of the economic reality, Puerto Rican leadership is sprouting up all over this country. So even though we don't have big numbers in Arizona, Puerto Rican leaders are going to make a big difference electorally, politically, and from an advocacy position, not just for Puerto Ricans in Arizona, but for Latinos in that state. And so I just wanted to share with you that, how do we leverage not only the obvious Puerto Rican vote in places like Florida, but this leadership class that we have amongst Latinos all over the country to create an agenda that not only Puerto Ricans can unify behind, and the economic scholars and the other scholars at this event can speak to that much better than I can, but I think we all can agree there's a handful of things we can agree on moving forward need to be the agenda for the island. But that we can leverage that right now to message to the Democratic primary candidates, to message to the larger progressive movement that if you want this Puerto Rican leadership movement that not only could carry the day for the progressive agenda, the political side of Florida, but also be the leadership that if we don't have the hard numbers, but as the leadership is going to mobilize voters in Texas and Arizona and some of these other states, the Puerto Rican agenda not only has to be front and center of of the larger Latino agenda, but it has to be a central part of that candidate's and down ballot of that community going into next year. We have that opportunity, so I just wanted to share with you that in grasping for how we figure this out, we have every opportunity to do so. We're not starting from zero. Look, the other message I want, and then we'll get to the questions, the other message that I got out of the last 2 months of my life was going and talking to Chicanos in San Antonio, Chitanos in San Antonio, Chicanos in San Diego, and all the rest was Mexican Americans and other Latinos sharing with me, wow, Puerto Ricans have always been the leaders around art, fashion, the obvious things that we're known for. But now with this bloodless revolution that was a globally recognized movement that we just had on the island a few months ago, now we realize what you all are really about. Like, they've gotten an understanding of what our community really is grounded in. And so this mobilization, we already are the global leaders. So let's just take ownership of it and make this happen for our community next year and a half leading into November 2020. Thank you.
So I want to hone in on the topic of diaspora solidarity. And you all come at this from varying perspectives, whether it's how we come together to give, whether we come together to educate, to develop agendas on resilience or power building. I want to hear from you what the difference you have seen is pre-hurricane and post-hurricane. I can tell you what we have seen. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I can tell you what we have seen in Florida pre and post-hurricane. We were, for many people, los que se fueron. Los que no se quedaron y aguantaron. And that was a refrain, and we have to admit that for a while. When the hurricane happened, the mobilization of resources, supplies, just people up and down the state, but across the nation, was unprecedented for anything we had ever seen. People were working together from every stripe, from every party, from every ideology. And I didn't know what that had done. I knew that it had mobilized resources. I knew it had made a difference, but I didn't realize the power that we now had to convene ourselves until the Renuncia movement. We put out one graphic to call people down to Miami Freedom Tower downtown and organize a protest at the same time that all the other diasporas and the protests in Puerto Rico were happening. We had so many people that the police chief called and said, "What is going on?" I said, "I promise you, it's peaceful, it's gonna be fine." And I said, "No, I know that. It's just all my officers want to go and protest with you instead of protecting." And it was hundreds and hundreds of people. We took over blocks. And as the media descended on us, I realized it was 5 of us. And we put out one call on social media. And we had students from every university. We had the old guard from Woodward that hadn't come out for something in 20 years. They were all there. We had a game changer on our hands. But we certainly had never seen this before Hurricane Maria. And we now had this. And it was important. So I'm not going to pick on you, but if you have a specific example, will you tell us how you've seen that manifest? Or if you think, no, nothing has changed, that's okay too.
I would say there's one thing that happened right after Maria. I was already living here in New York.
We can't hear you.
One thing that happened right after Maria, I was living here in New York already for about 6 years, 7 years. And even before the hurricane had left the island, while it was crossing from one side to the other, there was a significant group of Puerto Ricans here in New York City who were already getting together. That same night, we started getting together, and what I thought was really important and really a big difference was that this unification, this movement to unite went across socioeconomic levels, across race levels, because let's be frank, historically Puerto Ricans here in the mainland have taken sides based on their socioeconomic level and background, and that disappeared completely. And it was, to me, it was amazing. It was a realization that everyone who was there felt Puerto Rican and felt like each one of them could do something. We didn't know what, right? We didn't know, can I send diapers? You know, and people were sending water and Pampers and whatever. No. Everyone there started thinking about what they could do best. In my case, education was one of the fields that I was particularly focused on. But there were accountants, there were artists, there were restaurateurs, there were people from agriculture, there were people from all different sectors, and they got together to see how they could provide assistance to Puerto Ricans in the island. And I still, to this day, see that as an ongoing effort from Puerto Ricans here in New York. That's my story.
Yeah, I would say that I looked at it from 2 perspectives. One is as a Puerto Rican from Philadelphia. I think a lot of you in your local communities had the same experience where old political rivalries disappeared, and the political and leadership class that traditionally had different levels of engagement with each other let that go for one common goal. So I think the other thing that showed us was that we could align around common agendas. But I think the other thing, which I think was even more powerful for me, not only following it as a local Philadelphian, but just on Puerto Rican social media with all the diaspora, having friends around the country, was that people that had stepped away or turned away from activism because they didn't like the oppositional element to it, found an avenue to express themselves. And so I think what's really been exciting is that we have sort of this new crop of activists that frankly in some instances literally came out of nowhere, that had not been part of our traditional leadership networks, either politics or academia or social service, that have, I think for the most part, found an avenue to remain engaged. And so I think the Ricky Renuncia movement gave them another platform to mobilize that diaspora. So I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities because we have a much bigger pool of people, and I think they've seen where we can align around a common agenda that's not either bogged down in local, in this case in the Northeast Democratic inner city politics, or traditional island politics. I think we have a lot of opportunity to engage them on the next steps of our movement.
So for us in particular, we saw that people really want to help, and everybody has a unique way that they want to be engaged. In our case, we either try to match them with a nonprofit in Puerto Rico, and also people that are calling our office to just say, I heard there was a group from Puerto Rico. Can you like connect us to a job opportunity? So we're trying to fill that gap and have people engaged. A lot of times, the diaspora tends to be a lot of based on their own vision of the status quo where they want to fit in the sphere. We try to keep just an open gate to match them with their passion, whether it's like an education or a project, whether it's just if they're passionate for science, and try to find their own avenue for feeling connected with the island, and then also with our cultural values, which we cherish very much.
Are there things that work and things that don't work when convening the diaspora, when trying to achieve that solidarity to actually get things done for our issues in the diaspora and for Puerto Rico in terms of its economic advancement, etc.?
I have one comment about the previous question that ties into this one, which is about the diaspora in itself. I think that there is something that a colleague of mine that I think you all know, Silva-Puras, we were one day talking about what was his biggest epiphany that came out. There was a revelation that came out of Maria that somehow enhanced his own understanding of Puerto Rican identity. What was it? We posed that question, we were drinking too much and trying to figure this out. And he's like, well, el vecino. I realized that for years I had not talked to mi vecino, you know? In part because there were a lot of bushes, because he lives outside of San Juan, and so there was a lot of trees and whatever, and life is busy, so you don't talk to el vecino. And he says, after Maria, everybody was talking to el vecino. And we discovered that we have this vecino culture that we had relinquished from the 50s and 60s. There was no more vecino. We were busy. Our kids, he said, oh my God, I mean, these people had grandchildren that were the same age of my grandchildren, and they had never played, and we had, you know, them at the same time, and they didn't know each other. And I think that happened in the bigger picture in terms of the diaspora, that I think el puertorriqueño descubrió, I think, at least for me, I would like to believe, that we discovered that our nation was bigger than the island. That the nation really, in order to really define the Puerto Rican nation, we could not define it along traditional lines anymore. And that was a very peculiar and unique reality that didn't have a narrative really spelled out. I think Centro has been working at that narrative for 40 years, but it hasn't really expanded beyond the academic circles. Can we come up with a real, you know, community grassroots narrative that really translates for us who we are as a nation? We're definitely 6 million outside and 3 million there, or whatever it is, 3.5 and whatever it is, but over 60% of us are outside the area. So who are we? I think that after Maria, the same way that the vecino showed up, we as a nation showed up in a way that really messed up with our ideas of who we were. And we're still coming to terms with what that is. I don't think it's clear. I don't think there are precedents to understand what kind of animal we are. It's going to require a huge imaginative leap here. And I think it's exciting. I think we are about to set something up, because in the face of climate change, when you're going to be facing exodus after exodus, as you know, we are the frontline communities of climate change-driven weather. The Caribbean, we thought that what happened in Maria and what happened 2 weeks ago was going to happen 40 years from now, which is whole islands becoming uninhabited, left, abandoned, destroyed. We are facing now what we thought was going to happen in 50 years. There's no more time. So what is the nation of Puerto Rico in the face of climate change and exodus that keeps depleting us from our constituency on the ground? I think that's the biggest revelation about what the diaspora after Maria for me.
I don't think comment you made about the vecino. So I think going back to your question, what works and what doesn't work? I experienced the same thing. Vecinos who had never met each other met after the hurricane. That happened to me also in Puerto Rico after Hugo. I was in San Juan when Hugo struck the island. What doesn't work is when after the crisis passes, the immediacy of the crisis passes, that the vecinos go back to acting as they were before the crisis. And unfortunately, that does happen a lot. So what we have to focus is on trying to find systemic ways or efforts to have a significant lifespan. I'm going to use an example from the world that I know, which is entrepreneurship, and I'm glad to see my colleague here from Guayacan, Laura Cantero. There's a member of the Diaspora, maybe some of you have heard about him. His name is Rick Elias. Rick Elias is a very prosperous, very successful Puerto Rican who lives in North Carolina. Has a company that he founded called Red Venture. And he created this program called Forward 787, after, of course, our area code. And Forward 787 to this day is investing close to $100 million to create capacity in Puerto Ricans from both the mainland and the island to launch their own tech firms. Okay? That to me is an example of a systemic change, something that will surpass, will definitely live way beyond Maria and the crisis caused by Maria. That could have implications for 10, 20, 30, 50 years, as Rafael was saying. Many Puerto Ricans now are in positions of power here in the US, and we can make a difference if we use that influence, those positions of power, to help each other. Like, you know, certain other communities and nationalities, like the Israelis, they help each other tremendously. Why can't we do the same thing? Now that we have influential people all over the U.S. The chancellor of this university, Pedro Matos, Puerto Rican, born and raised in San Juan. He heads a system that has over 300,000 students. You know, when we get people in those positions, we need to make sure that we take the full advantage of it.
The thing that comes to mind with your question to me was, and there's always been this, I've always cringed at the notion when we do political work that Latinos and Puerto Ricans especially would always come up to me and say, Ralph, the problem is we don't have this like seminal leader. And I think that we just abolished that theory in the last 3 years with our various levels of movements. And I think that that's something that, you know, there was no hurdle to entry. You didn't have to be necessarily engaged in party politics. You didn't have to be engaged in, you know, some sort of issue-based sector. You could come at this from your own different skill sets. You know, the reality is in a lot of our communities throughout the diaspora, there were 3 or 4 charitable entities going on. You know, the leadership class had a campaign, La Comunidad had a campaign, the churches had a campaign. So I think we have to understand that we don't need to have that bureaucratic structure and just continue to create these vehicles so that you know, there's a low bar to entry so people can continue to express themselves in their leadership capacity.
So let's go to civic engagement. And by civic engagement, I don't mean just political power. Civic engagement can be expressed in many different ways, and you all do it in your own ways. But I want to talk about that empowerment of people. Is our community aware of the power that it has, expressed or not yet, fully? And what needs to happen for that power of our community across the United States and on the island to be fully expressed and really benefit our community?
Okay, I'll start with that one. Okay, so I had mentioned that we launched our first intervention as a nonprofit founded in Colorado in the diaspora, wanting to help was to launch La Guagua Solidaria, which was a 24 months to 200 Farms campaign to help support and rebuild the agroecology sector, which had been very impacted after Maria and had been very small, but had been growing fast just before Maria. So we launched the Puerto Rico Resilience Fund to raise monies to help the farmers. And so that was our first incursion. And we call that Guagua Solidaria 1.0. Now we're in the 2.0 phase, which is learning from lessons learned and realizing that it's more important to actually help conventional farmers transition than to put all our resources into the agroecology sector. A big lesson learned in terms of what you're specifically asking is, the health index of our ability to really come together as a community in the island, as a community outside the island. It's been difficult. I have actually found that as someone from the diaspora, coming with everything, investing everything, even my own retirement, and I don't bring that to put myself here as a sacrificial being, but just to illuminate the point I'm going to make is that there's a lot of self-criticism to be made as Puerto Rican citizens and as, I believe, subjects of a long colonial history. There's a lot of territorialism and there's a lot of prejudice. I've been called Puerto Riqueña de acá and Puerto Riqueña de allá. And whenever there is an issue or things get really tense, suddenly I am de allá, or I am New Yorican, even though I didn't grow up in New York. And so, I was in Puerto Rico, in Palmas Altas, until I was 10, and I'm part of that segment of the diaspora that comes and goes, and was raised there, and yet, when things get tense, there's a default place of separation and of prejudice that I am ashamed of, that we ourselves as a community can go there. And it is something that we don't want to talk about because we're so, I want to make things right. I hate conflict. And so to go there and to tell that my own community is broken like that, it hurts. But I really feel that doing my service work in Puerto Rico from the diaspora, that there's a historical wound there that I myself don't know exactly how to work. And I would like a whole summit on that. How do I deal with those historical wounds so that I can be of best service and that my service can be honored the way it deserves to be honored and vice versa. And so that's, right now in terms of the youth piece, we put that project on hold and I decided to go straight to where I think is la yugular del futuro, que es la juventud. So we launched the Promotores Verdes Youth Program last summer, creating this 1-week-long nature immersion programs where in 7 days we graduate adolescents in a program of environmental literacy grounded in cultural identity. We have 4 modules: environmental literacy, relationship between health and wellness and the health of the environment. Agroecology should be a human right that every child should know how to grow their own food. Number 3, green jobs and jobs within the natural resources management field that many young people don't even know they can make a livelihood in that space. And number 4 is emotional intelligence, because nada de esto aterriza en el alma si no hay inteligencia emocional. So we've been working on that. We've done 2 of these camps. Last summer and this summer, we've graduated 78 adolescents that are really pumped up. And we're very proud that we were also able, in an alliance with la Universidad de Puerto Rico, Departamento de Estudios Continuos, get an accreditation to get 26 teachers from middle schools to go through our program. So as of 2 weeks ago, we had the first 26 Promotores Verdes teachers going back to their schools to launch Promotores Verdes Clubes de Jóvenes. So that's the area we're working with actually, very grassroots, young people, teachers that can propagate the whole concept and the whole program faster, and also things that are very grassroots like La Ruta de Expresión, which is we are an environmental organization that uses arts and culture as a vehicle to advance environmental literacy. So in Caño de Martín Peña, we just concluded last Saturday La Ruta de Expresión, which is a bike path guided by 18 murals that tell the ecological and cultural history of the egg communities that comprise El Caño de Martín Peña. And now we're looking for funding to actually create the signage that puts la gotita del saber of each mural, and then also create an app where people that go biking through that ciclovia can hear the story of the communities in their earphones. So that's another example, a very grassroots citizen engagement program.
To me, when I listen to your question, I really think it's a resource question. Because if I think about some of the best, and I'm looking at it from a political organizing lens, some of the best political campaign professionals, leadership trainers, motivational speakers, teachers of our culture are Puerto Rican. And many of them are in this room, frankly. And at this conference, the question is, very few of us work for Puerto Rican focused entities. And many of us internally push for resources. Of course, my board member here, Dr. Melendez, from Unidos US, a big chunk of our, for example, Unidos' voter registration capacity is going to be in Florida, and has been for the foreseeable future. So, and that's with a lot of internal advocacy. My point is that I think, to your point, it really is marrying the resources that we saw we were able to develop from a philanthropic perspective during Maria and post-Maria, and since then on the humanitarian side, to really galvanize some of those same resources to Puerto Rican run entities that have the capacity. The question isn't the thirst our community has. Our young people are dying to know who they are, because they're going through all these identity issues and throughout the diaspora all over the country. The issue is having the capacity to be able to provide that education, provide that organizing expertise. And so I think it's about marrying these collective resources in a Puerto Rican lens. And the last thing I want to say on that, the vehicles are very important. And so one of the things that I would ask all of us to really think about from the MPRA on down to all of our local leadership groups is that it's been great to see some of the organizations, the nonprofits that have sprouted up post-Maria and even during the Promesa process in areas of philanthropy and awareness, and there's so many, which is great. But we have to develop more, frankly, politically oriented entities, 501c4 organizations, PACs, and other similar type organizations, so we have the freedom to move our agenda forward without the restrictions that nonprofit organizations.
Speaking of resources, one of the areas of civic engagement that Angelique has specialized in the last few years has been developing our philanthropic abilities. And so can you speak a little bit to what that means? So some people are going to knock on doors, some people are going to educate our youth, some people are going to develop nonprofits and C4s, some people are going to invest in the future of our community. And that is civic engagement too, from another completely different lens. Can you speak to what that type of civic engagement means? How far our community has come in terms of giving and investing, and what work is left to do?
So friends, I love how you phrased that question, because you mentioned power. And I feel that it's 2 years after Hurricane Maria, but I feel that we all dropped what we were doing. We came out to just do what everybody thought was impossible and made it possible because everybody was helping. And now I feel that in a little bit, a lot of the people, they're back to their comfort zone. At least I feel that some people are. And we have this opportunity to just change everything. And it could be through giving, but it could also be through volunteering. And in our case, we ask, and we are out of the comfort zone. A lot of times we go to places that are unimaginable to ask. And we're probably a lot of times the only Latino organization there, or the only Puerto Rican group. And it's so important. Volunteering is crucial, but also give $5, just $5, $1 a week, something, because a lot of nonprofits are underfunded. And it's unfortunate because there's 11 million Puerto Ricans, I read this week or this past week, according to Anolia. And just imagine if every Puerto Rican could give $1. That's like amazing. Imagine the work that can be done from the community level. And we will all just come together to either give that dollar or volunteer your time. And I think that's something that's super powerful that we should not take for granted.
And I know that Mirna touched on it in the panel this afternoon, and it's one of Laura Cantero's refrains. We have so much talent, and we have people in such positions of power, and we have people with resources. And how do we mobilize that into this movement of civic engagement? So I want to know if there's index cards already. And if not, index cards?
Well,
No, hands?
I thought you were gonna say, if not, just.
If not, if not, I am going to give the first comment to the founder of the summit.
Wow.
And
Appreciate it.
our guiding light here, to respond to some of the things he's heard. Please go ahead.
Actually, I just want to say that I love you guys. This is an excellent panel. I appreciate that you're coming all the way. And I think from my perspective, I try to understand patterns in our community and where the trends are and so forth. I think, first of all, the solidarity movement, sort of generally speaking, what you guys represent in so many ways, it's sort of define the new historical moment that we have. That awakening in the diaspora is there, and people are harnessing, just like you have described, from the youth or from the from the donors or entrepreneurship, whatever it is. I've seen a particular revival in a few areas that I like to mention and see how you guys can advise us as to how do we tap into that. One of the first one is, I'm serious, we like to party, okay? So we counted head before Maria, and there were about 70 parades and festivals, maybe a bit more, because they're counting. But anything you identify through Facebook and whatever, celebrations. Today we have counted about 150. So that's injection of partying, that we haven't seen in recent memory. It could be that they're more visible, they were there, they're more visible. But the celebration of culture, which goes to, I'm here, I want to share, I want to see my friends and whatever. It's happening, right? The other upsurge that I've seen is in entrepreneurship, in businesses that are started. Our last study from 2007 to 2012, which is the last census that we have, business census. Now the new 2017 is coming out, it's not out yet. But that was, Puerto Ricans had the highest rates of business formation, especially in Florida, okay? That's related to the migration, post-crisis migration. So that's another area. Part of that sector is the upsurge of business association, Latino, mix, and what have you. So I think that cultural activism, the diaspora solidarity is there. The question is, how do we institutionalize that? If we're really 9 million, whatever, right? How do we actually make that presence like sustainable and make it count where it matters in Puerto Rico and what we're going through in the island there. So my question is one generic about the moment and how again is that we can harness this. We have some ideas and Central is implementing, as you know, several strategies. But I'm curious to know what our experts here on engagement will advise us to do.
I'd like to react to a couple of comments that Dr. Menendez made. The first one is a reference that Angelique did earlier to the orange economy, Economía Naranja. And I think you mentioned departing, which is an element of something that we have a huge potential to develop not only within the Hispanic community of the US and Puerto Rico, but worldwide. And it's our talent our creativity and innovation talent. You talked about partying, but what about music? What about acting? What about performance? Maybe some of you followed David Begnaud when the Ricky Renuncia movement started. Said, I've never seen people who protest in such a creative way as Puerto Rican. It was amazing. And I think it's a reflection of the fact that we know it, that we are extremely creative. Now, how can we turn that creativity into, again, something that is systemic and can grow to a world-class level in terms of participation and business creation and entrepreneurship. And I'm very optimistic because I see in the new generation a group of young women and men who are saying, you know what, I'm sorry my French, the heck with the government. I'm not going to depend on government anymore. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to start my own coffee plantation or my own tech firm or my own business. And I see that to the extent that that young generation, that young crowd that is moving up, takes into creativity as a way to develop businesses and entrepreneurship and takes it worldwide. For example, urban music. ¿Cómo se llama? Este muchacho, no sé nada de esto de música. Bad Bunny. My daughter look at me like, Bad Bunny and all those Puerto Rican musicians are recognized worldwide. What are we doing with that? What are we doing with that in terms of wealth creation that we can spread across our entire citizenship? I think, again, it goes back to giving particularly this younger generation the tools to know how to commercialize that creativity. Because I met a lot of my students, extremely creative, but they have no clue how to commercialize that creativity. That's where we need to find the linkages between business and that creative talent.
And Adrian, I have some numbers that you're gonna like. Of the first 100,000 that we raised in the first 3 months after Maria for La Guagua Solidaria, 42,000 were raised through parties. There were dinners or school parties or neighborhood parties. So $42,000 were raised. So some of these festivals and parties maybe are tied to these congregating to support. And then one other aspect about meaningful work. I think that another thing that Maria did, as we all aligned ourselves to help from the diaspora, it was, we all have works and jobs, and some are more boring than others and less meaningful than others. And I think that what Maria did, it just gave us this sense of meaningful work, that suddenly whatever we were doing to help from outside had meaning. And I think that has a power that we don't even know. But I feel that philosophically and spiritually, Maria and the solidarity that the diaspora cultivated had to do with suddenly having a sense that the work was meaningful. And when you work with love, you bind yourself to yourself, you bind yourself to others, and you bind yourself to God. I don't care if you're a believer or not, but you bind yourself to something very profound inside. And that meaning piece, I think, is essential to what happened with the solidarity movement after Maria.
So I want to be quick. I'm Irene.
Louder.
To all the panelists. I have 2 thoughts, and one is very personal because I experienced it myself. I've been stateside for 10 years, and I was one of those that when offered to help, it was de acá o de allá. So I felt that, and I think a lot of the diaspora, Puerto Ricans, of course, knew that they have a skill set and that they have a talent that they can offer up. Maybe it's not resources, maybe it's not funding or donations, but they have a specific skill set, and I think that's extremely untapped in the civic engagement, social impact, social innovation ecosystem in Puerto Rico. Is I have yet to find a platform or an organization that is matching skill set and talent and expertise in a particular area to a need of an organization that's doing this amazing work, whether it's grassroots, so offering that up as food for thought, and if there is any person or entity or organization thinking about that more deeply, I would love to help. Second is the catch-22 in my mind of education, and Anna Maria mentioned this in the plenary session, is building an ecosystem where the community feels empowered to participate socially in their community, and I don't think in Puerto Puerto Rico. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico and moved here 10 years ago. I never felt like I was taught or given a toolkit or a pathway on how to help and how to be part of the community in a way where I felt that that was expected of me. So I think the conversation of civic duty and civic engagement needs to be more like correlated. And I think a lot of people think about civic duty and participating in the political process. So I think institutions of higher education have a duty on their own to teach this. I went to school in Puerto Rico, colegio. Nobody here. Thank you. And I studied business, marketing, and organizational studies. And even though there was a lot of community conversation and community service and, you know, doing these great projects with the community, it was still a project. It wasn't a conversation around what this means for you as a person and as a human being and carrying that on. I agree totally with Angelique. There was a surge after Maria, and I don't see that. I mean,
Is it a suggestion for Centro?
It's a suggestion for any organization or institution that has the power to convene and to talk more about this. I think the education component of what it means, maybe a toolkit of how you can, you know, be part of this movement. Whether it's call it social innovation, call it social impact, you know, civic entrepreneurship, civic engagement, call it whatever. But I think there's a need for it, especially with the people that you're trying to reach, with the young community. Okay?
Yeah, I'd like to just kind of piggyback on it and kind of just flesh that concept out a little bit. One of the things I would suggest, and I not to put you, Dr. Melendez, on the spot, is I think the National Puerto Rican Agenda is in a unique place to do this, is that I'm obsessed with following what's happening with the diaspora, with our Facebook world, is that we have a lot of these local models. So like Chicago Puerto Ricans are really good at policy and like, you know, sort of this community leadership model. The Miami group has some really strong skill sets around engaging the business community. Our DC Puerto Rican community has really mobilized in a lot of interesting ways. But there are a lot of local movements and a lot of, because of their skill sets of their industry and, you know, just the local leadership class that's there. So I think one of the things that would be good as we work together to sort of house, okay, who's got the best practices around how to engage Puerto Ricans with this environmental lens, or who's got the business acumen. And I think there's some local models that are happening sort of organically that I think we just need to house and refine and find ways to replicate in some of the other markets.
I'm going to say that this comes up every year, which is the clearinghouse of movements, ideas, etc. But, sir.
Okay, so Puerto Ricanos have always outstood as leaders globally, as was being said. I do a lot of traveling. I've been to Spain, I say I'm Puerto Riqueño, Eyes Glow, Mexico, Panama, Dominican Republic, etc. Okay. Now, what the hurricane did in this crisis is that it shows us that in spite of the fact that we have a lot of divisions among ourselves, we can find consensus and come around that, and that's basically what we need. The crisis has brought out some of the Puerto Rican unity, consciousness, renaissance in cultural practices and leadership. But as Dr. Melendez was saying, there is a big challenge, okay? And that's how are we going to retain that cultural identity and all those things that came up and put us together in the aftermath or during the crisis. It's difficult and it is a challenge, especially when we're going to be dealing with young people. The Jews and the Chinese are good examples of this. The Chinese, for instance, you go to graduate school, you go to business school, when you come out, what you do is that you help a fellow student, you make an investment so that he can then, you know, be successful in business. And the Jews have survived a number of times, but they have control over their culture, control over their economy, and we don't. We're all spread out. We have an identity and a consciousness that we are Puerto Ricanos, but we're still not where we need to be. Now there is some, I'm going to finish with this. There
Question
are some
or recommendation?
Yeah. There are some very hard issues that need to be addressed. Irene express that, about the identity. Eduardo Cenadores wrote a book called Half Land, Cold Season, in which he talks about the experiences of Puerto Ricans when they go back to Puerto Rico. Look at what happened to the young lords. They died out because there was a cultural thing with the nationalism. And also, Congressman Gutierrez talked about even with the refugees going to Florida, who were basically saying, we're Puerto Ricans and you are not. And then there is an 800-pound gorilla that nobody talks about, and that's the issue of race in Puerto Rico. Dr. Samuel Betances wrote an article called The Prejudice of No Prejudice in Puerto Rico. So until we begin to address all of these things, then, you know, we may not be able to capture what we need to move forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. Just a brief comment, which is that I feel like we find ourselves, like every generation or even less, trying to reinvent the wheel around a lot of these questions of like civic engagement and civic education. To anyone who listened to the 1619 Project or read the 1619 Project, I'll remind us that Black Americans laid the groundwork for so much of what has functioned in our democracy and in our nation in general up to this point. And in this conversation, I'm reminded of the Freedom Schools movement, right? A grassroots movement to educate people about history, civics, you know, politics and culture from a culturally specific and competent place and lens, and with an empowerment agenda. And I wonder if that's a model to look to again. Thank you.
I wanted to suggest that part of civic engagement is connecting to the youth, but thinking of schools and education, that the focus is generally on college and career ready. Aspida originally, and today, it's college, career, and civic engagement. In the state of New York, the reason for a sound basic education is so that you can serve on a jury and you can vote intelligently. And so on Board of Regents that I'm on, we're focusing on getting schools, teachers, districts to build that third C. It seems to me we have an ideal situation. Not an ideal situation. We have a situation that's ideal for applying the concept that our young people need to be trained in civic engagement. We have Teens for Change here in New York, which has been acting in a leadership role to push for desegregation of schools. They know that their schools are desegregated. And so I just urge you to consider the work with high school, particularly high school and college students, that internships and opportunities for community service be seen as one of the 3 elements that students are being prepared for. Not just a diploma, and not just getting to college or a job, a career.
Let me make a quick comment on that, if I may, Francis. I'm glad you raised that point, because I think universities in Puerto Rico and schools in Puerto Rico need to do a much better job of what you just mentioned. The university I represent is Sagrado Corazón University. We are extremely conscious of that fact, and have made a modification in how we think about the student and what the student should learn when he or she graduates. And we are integrating the Santurce community. For those who don't know, Sagrado is in the middle of Santurce, right next to Barrio Obrero and Villa Palmeras. And what we have created is a concept called Nuestro Barrio. And in Nuestro Barrio, you basically engage the students with community organizations that are, some are for profit, some are non-profit, some are cultural and creative industries. And we have the opportunity for students to help those community organizations. And that's something that in the future our students will reflect in a, let's call it an Uber transcript. The transcript has to evolve. It's not about, oh, I got an A in history or a B in math. No. It's what did you do throughout your entire university career, including a section dedicated to what you did in terms of community involvement. How did you help a business, or how did you help a nonprofit, or how did you help a community organization take that organization to the next level? So to the extent that we can mimic that model throughout the island, I think we would do a significant service to it.
Just add that the version here is portfolio consortium schools. The focus is not on 5 regions, it's on being able to show your work, your creative thinking, critical thinking, and applying it to the real world through service.
Angelique.
Quickly, I want to say that our SEEDS program, the Youth Entrepreneurship Program, I was sharing before, it starts at age 9. Why? Because kids in Puerto Rico are super smart, but a lot of times they don't have the networks that they will need, which is mentorship, but also schools don't teach financial literacy, which you need in order to make a decision for college, get a scholarship, and the guidance that needs. So we try to start from a very young age at 9 and then match them with the mentors that then they can go successfully to college or a technical career if they decide to choose one.
So I'm gonna do, we are actually out of time, so we're gonna do a round robin, and then you can completely come up here and not let them leave. But we're gonna do a quick round robin. In 10 years, what does our diaspora movement look like in one sentence?
What does it look like?
What does it look like? When we look at our diaspora movement in 10 years, we just talked about the hurricane, the surge in energy. What does it look like?
We will have married our economic power with the organizing knowledge, know-how that we already have.
Say that again?
That we will have married the economic power, that we will capacitate this organizing movement and best practices that we already have.
We will have a vote in diaspora.
We have a system, a Chinese population or Chinese community that the gentleman mentioned, in which every single Puerto Rican in the diaspora helps or mentors another Puerto Rican to move up in the socioeconomic ladder.
I hope that the diaspora is really that bridge that will build that self-sufficient Puerto Rico, or that Puerto Rico that we all dream of.
Yep.
Fantastic. Puerto Rican president.
Hi, for me? Yeah, what is it? To run for nothing. Oh.